Clear prop.
Tower 738 Yankee number 2 following twin traffic, 3 mile final. Clear passenger. 1 Charlie Bravo, makes straight in runway 25, join 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhearn. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic as always. This week, we're going to go back to some of our roots here and have a good flight training discussion. We are going to talk about the hidden costs of rushing flight training. I actually had a conversation with a mom and a son today at the flight school. And the conversation was about how they spent so much money and they didn't finish the solo phase. And I looked at everything and I talked to the young man and I talked to the mom, and they were very open. In fact, they're wanting to come back. They want to get going again. And I asked the young man, I said, what do you think happened? Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Let's talk about it. And he said, I just didn't study. And I said, well, what do you think is going to be different this time? And he goes, well, I've matured 2 years. I'm graduating high school. I'm pretty sure I can study now. And I'm like, that's fantastic. The thing I talk about at the flight school all the time is that when people come unprepared and maybe even a little bit unmotivated, but they want to fly, all they're doing is wasting money and buying my wife a pair of shoes that she doesn't need. It is a common theme around there. I joke about it all the time. My wife, I used to say black shoes. She got mad. So now she said, just say white tennis shoes, because she's retired and she's got a white tennis shoes fetish instead of a black shoes fetish. But end of the day, you've seen it, Wally. I've seen it thousands of times that when someone comes unprepared, the plane is the most expensive classroom in the world. If you don't understand the words that your instructor is going to use, you're going to just waste that whole lesson. And yes, you might log 1.7, 1.9, doesn't matter. Those hours count, but they're not valuable. How can we eliminate the hidden costs by rushing flight training? That's what this episode's all about. And I want to kick it off by saying accelerated is not always accelerated. To me, accelerated is marketing. It is not the true test of how you get done. I do think there's good schools out there that are quote unquote accelerated, but for the large majority of students, Wally, you've met many people. What do you think about accelerated flight training and where it works and maybe where it doesn't work?
Where I think it works, and I hope I don't offend people by saying this, but where I think it works is if the student, okay, and we're all students. I'm about a 30,000 hour pilot, and I consider myself a student of aviation. I learn every day. But
you are like a helicopter student pilot right now, aren't you?
Well, yeah. Okay, I am, and I'm a tail dragger student pilot too. I scare myself when I get out in that. But anyway, so where I think the accelerated type places work well is when the student is mature. Okay, and I'll give you an example. I had a friend that I met years ago. He was in athletic administration at my university, and he left there and he took a job at another university as an athletic director. He was actually a VP of the university, VP of athletics for a university in Texas. And I got a call from him one day, and he said, "Hey, Wally, I want to talk to you about a career option." And he basically said, "I want to quit being an athletic director and become a professional pilot." So here's a guy who is, in his late 40s. He's been around the block. He's got life experience. He's managed, $1 million budgets. He's hired and fired coaches. He's got some tread on the tire. I told him, I said, I think one of these type places would work well for you. And he did go to one. He didn't go to he went to a lesser known one. And he's out flying right now. He's a professional pilot right now. So that's where I think it works. I venture to say for the 19-year-old who has just graduated high school, I'm not sure it works as well. Just because there's, oh man, again, I hate to say this, but there isn't a maturity level.
Yep. I would add to that to say it's their program may not fit with your lifestyle, whatever that is. Like
Absolutely. Absolutely.
7 months isn't 7 months for all of us. It varies greatly, right? And so I think that's marketing. And then you have to go still involve yourself with that location, with that school, learn how they do it. I use this example quite a bit. If their accelerated program is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but you only work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, well, obviously that's not going to work, right? And yes, maybe you could find another school that does Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but who can go 7 days straight, work and accelerated training and keep the wheels on, right? I think it's a myth. I do believe it's a myth in the large percentile, 85% plus percentile, that it's going to work the way it's advertised for most of us. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. I think multi programs are probably a good example of where an accelerated program works. But they've refined and refined and refined to make that work the way it works for most people. I also think that accelerated just doesn't, well, in most cases, just costs more money. And it's not about the dollar per hour. It is about that most people don't come prepared, so they're repeating things multiple times. Um, and so we'll take the corporate conglomerate out of the story and just say, if you train 5 days a week but only have 2 days to study, there's no way you're going to be able to be prepared for those lessons, and you're going to miss things. And that school, whoever that school is probably going to have a schedule that you have to follow, and you're not going to be successful simply because you don't have the time to prepare yourself. We all need about 250 hours to be commercial pilots, but not all of us do it the same pace, the same way. And it's just going to take a lot more time to repeat those things. And then we talk about it all the time, Wally, but what about check rides? You administered thousands of check rides at this point. How many of them that you get a call from a flight school? I'm sure I've made the same phone call and say, Wally, I've got this young man that's going to go to college. They're leaving next Friday. He's going to get signed off today. Any chance you could squeeze him in early next week? And you graciously say yes. Early next week becomes weather. You graciously flip things around to get this kid done. How good does a check ride go when there's that much external pressure because of a deadline?
I, I don't have hard numbers, but I guarantee the pass rate on that check ride, on those type check rides, is lower than the normal pass rate. I'm just making up. Well, I'm not even going to use numbers. Let's say the normal pass rate is X percent. I would say for this check ride, it's X minus 20%.
There you go. And so, what do we do about that? Well, work with your flight school, work with your flight instructor, try to have a better plan, try to make that external pressure not be what's the external pressure of accelerating it, not be what's driving the decision or the timeline. And then in the case that it does, make sure you're ready. One thing we've talked a lot about on air and off air is the consistency of training prior to a check ride. So in that event, if that person said, gets signed off on, let's call it Wednesday of last week, and can't fly until Thursday of next week, that's 8 days. What does an 8 day gap in flight training mean to you for a student pilot who's going to try and pass a private pilot check ride?
It's huge, and I can tell. I mean, there have been so many times on check rides where I'm in there with the applicant, and it may be the initial check ride, or it may be a continuance. Maybe we discontinued for whatever, but you can tell, especially a student pilot going for their private. They don't have a ton of time, and it's things like struggling to find the tower frequency. We're out there, we're number one for takeoff, and they don't know what the tower frequency is. I think that it's um, I think you ought to have that memorized. I just think you do at your home airport. You ought to know the frequencies. Heck, my home airport, Monroe, Louisiana, I was flying there in 1981, ground 129.9, tower 118.9, departure 126.9, ATIS 125.05. I still know it, but I'm a numbers guy. So, but and that kind of is a red flag for me when I see that. The other thing that I see, and I just had this happen the other day. Um, young man, we scheduled a check ride for Saturday morning, and on about Thursday, I get a text from his CFI that says, "Hey, the airplane is going to be in maintenance. We're going to have to change airplanes." And it was changing types. It was going from a Cherokee to a Cessna, I believe, and it was an instrument rating. Um, so I said, "Well, okay, all right, I'll go in and change it on my end." And we got there, and then we hop in the airplane, and the airplane had an engine analyzer, and the young man didn't know how to work it, and I
Mm.
said, "How about that light that's flashing and it says remaining fuel 0?" I said, "We just gonna ignore that?" And he didn't know how to answer because he did not know how to work this JPI. He did not know how to tell it that we actually had fuel in the airplane. And so that was a flag. He ended up electing to discontinue and saying, "Hey, I'm not familiar with this airplane." And there were other things. It wasn't just that, but there were other things in the airplane that he really didn't know how to work.
Yeah, and that's both acceleration and external pressures where they've got you on the hook. You've given them a date. They don't want to go through the DP deluge of waiting again, and they try to accelerate it themselves, but it's not the right decision. And while this is all really hard, I think it's just grounding yourself in not trying to accelerate things that should be accelerated. So part one, there was the urge to rush when accelerated isn't accelerated. Part two is the myth of saving money. Rushing often costs more. Would you agree with that statement, Wally? I wrote this show, but would you agree with that the myth of saving money, rushing normally does cost more?
I would think so. I definitely would think so. Sometimes you're just forcing things. Some people, it just takes them longer. I look at my my musical career coming up as a drummer. Man, I was horrible for the first couple of years. And then all of a sudden the light bulb went off and all of a sudden I realized how to read music. And I just remember going back to school after seventh grade and people saying, "Wow, what happened?" And I'll tell you what happened. My family took a long road trip in a motorhome from Louisiana to California, and I sat in the back of the motorhome with a basketball and a pair of drumsticks and lots of music. And in music we call it woodshedding. I just woodshed, and all of a sudden the light bulb came on. But it took me for those first 2 years trying to play music. I was horrible.
Mm.
So people mature at different. You're a golfer, Bobby. I mean, if I were playing golf with you, and I'd really only been playing for about 9 months, I don't think you'd expect me to be very good.
I would not. No, I would not. And I would expect you to make bad decisions, of course, right? Because you
Yeah,
haven't experienced those things yet.
right.
I think that's what comes with experience, of course. But I can say I have hundreds of examples. We're going to talk through a few of them here, but the one pet peeve we have is the advice by external people that say, "Why don't you knock out the knowledge exam before you start training?" To me, that in the biz, that makes zero sense to me. Like it just makes no sense. And it still happens where I meet people who say they reach out to the flight school, send an email to info@unitedflight.com and say, "Hey, I've passed my knowledge exam and I want to do the flight portion now." They disconnect the two. They think because they passed the knowledge exam that they have all the knowledge they need to be a professional pilot or a private pilot, and they don't realize that that's the rote part of it, right? Like we all took a
Yeah.
driver's written exam, but we still had to demonstrate to the examiner that we understood the information at a much deeper level. I think it's some of the worst advice that I hear in aviation because why would you go do that when you have so much opportunity to learn more? And the knowledge exam is going to take you about 60 minutes at some point in the future. There's no reason to rush the knowledge exam. And the fact that it says on the internet in a lot of places that it'll save you money makes no sense to me either. It's the exact same price.
Right.
It's going to take you a lot longer during the check ride because you're not going to score as well, and you're going to have to talk to Wally about everything that you missed. And there's just no logic to it saving you money. There's none. You're not going to get out of it.
Well,
The CFI is
yeah,
going to still have to talk to you.
exactly. And where I see it is, I see it in the ground portion. The applicants can answer. They can answer questions. I will say, tell me what are cloud separation requirements in Class D airspace. 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. Great. All right, let's go fly. Um, can we at least do pattern work? Oh yeah, it's 1,400 overcast. Okay, traffic patterns 1,000 feet. Yeah, we're below the clouds. I just go, wait a minute. But an hour ago you just told me we got to be 500 feet below the clouds. And there's a light bulb moment. They go, oh, well, I didn't think about it. And it's like, well, where have we been? What have we been thinking about? So you know something, but you can't take that knowledge and put it in real world situation. It's just like, you know, learning math skills. Okay, I can tell you that 8% of 100 is $8, but now I'm in a store and what I want has a price tag of $100 and it's 8% tax, but I can't tell you how much it is. Well, it's the same thing. We're just correlating.
No
And
question.
so I do see that, you know, people they know these book answers. You know, tell me what's density altitude? It's pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. Okay, what does that mean? The deer in the headlights look. It just happened today. Just happened to me today. Yeah.
Uh, well, I also think that the rushing where it costs more money is again lack of preparation. So we come in and go over a topic with our flight instructor. We go fly that topic. We didn't read the maneuvers guide. We're not ready. We're not set up. We don't even know how to set up for the maneuver, and we don't know why we didn't get all 8 maneuvers done that day because we spent all of our time working through just the setup process. When at home we could have chair flown for free, practice,
Yeah.
practice, 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 and then came really ready for that. But to have that much time to chair fly, we would need 3 days between lessons. And it's a mind-blowing math number, and we talk a lot about math on here, but I ask everybody at our school that comes in, we host these orientations to kind of give people a background of what they can expect from flight training. And I always say, what timeline from today do you think you could be applying for a job to be a flight instructor at this school? And I hear everything from 1 year to 5 years. And normally when I go back to that person that says 1 year, I say, how many times a week do you have to fly? And they say, oh, at least 5. I'm like, okay, let's do the math. So if you have to get 250 hours to be a commercial pilot, and the way we train, we kind of overlap the CFI training towards the end of that to help you get done more economically. If that's the case, 250 hours, we'll say we average 2 hours of flight. So we need 125 lessons. You know that math works, Wally. So we'll just hope the listeners know it works too. If we split that up into two chunks and we say the first half is going to be 62 hours, or sorry, 62 lessons, and the second half is going to be 63 lessons, and I start my flight training 2 times a week. That means to finish the first 62 lessons, I'm going to need 31 weeks to finish those. Seems reasonable, okay? And the second half, I train 3 times a week. That's 63 divided by 3. That's 21 lessons. 31 plus 21 is, Wally?
52.
And how many weeks are in a year?
52.
So in 1 year, if I just train 2 or 3 times a week, I could be a professional pilot. Now, it's not going to be at the airlines, but I would probably have enough time to be really close to my flight instructor certificate and apply for a job. I could do a few banner tows or other things like that, make money flying. But most people don't realize that to get done in a year, I only got to fly 2 or 3 times a week. And it's a simple thing that says, take a deep breath, slow down. How much more
Yeah.
prepared could you come if you only flew twice a week? If you gave yourself 3 days to study for one lesson and 2 days to study for the other lesson, it would be impactful. The other thing that I think a lot of people do to rush is their availability makes them condense their training in their mind, right? So I have a full-time job. I can only train on Saturday and Sunday. So what do? I train every Saturday and Sunday. Well, I have no time to study for the Sunday lesson ever. I don't know if I've finished the Saturday lesson before Sunday. And so you're in this quandary of almost not being prepared for one lesson a week. That's going to really set you back. You're going to repeat that lesson multiple times. Whereas if you could work with a school or work with a CFI and say, is there any way we could train late on Wednesdays and once on the weekend? Now you've got time to study. I don't think new flight students know that. And they just do what they're told. Hey, let's just train Saturday and Sunday. And they don't even know how hard that's going to be to do and how many repeat sessions that's going to take. This young man that I talked to today, I asked him what I asked a lot of people. Do you think if the Blue Angels chair fly, you should chair fly? And he says, yeah. And that documentary is worth anyone watching. I say it all the time, but the Blue Angels fly their set 3 times a day. They debrief their set 3 times a day. How many times do you think they chair fly their set as a group? 3 times a day. So by the end of the season, 7 months later, 210 days later, they have chair flown that probably 500 times. They have no question of what they're going to do at the 6 minute and 32-second mark of their flight. It's just so rhythmic. How good would a check ride go if someone had done a chair flying exercise to set up for slow flight 600 times before they did a slow flight?
Yeah,
you would miss it.
Absolutely.
So chair flying is the big one. If you don't have a maneuvers guide, you can have mine, maneuversguide.com. It's what United Flight Systems uses. We iterate that thing. We've made it the best we can make it. It's free out there. Go grab it if you don't have one. Sit in front of a cockpit poster, sit in front of a screen with a cockpit on it, chair fly that thing to death. That is free. No money. If you want to save money in flight training, do that. All right, let's jump to part 3, impatience, wanting the certificate too soon. Who do you see that wants the certificate too soon, Wally?
Well, I'm going to say a lot of times it's parents.
Mm-hmm. Parents. And they also, I'm a parent, you're a parent. We know our kids' strengths and weaknesses normally before they even go to kindergarten. I think it's parents of kids who think this is going to be the solution because they're not going to do good in college. That's probably not going to work. I also think it is the parent who wants to be a pilot, the wealthy businessman who works 12 hours a day, has more money than they do free time, and they're like, I want to buy a plane so I don't have to fly commercial. Can I get my private pilot certificate in 30 days?
Yeah.
Maybe, but not you. You work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. When are you going to squeeze this in? The math on how much time it takes is a real number as well. And to me, that real number is okay. If you fly a 2.5 hour flight lesson, it takes you 45 minutes to get to the flight school. It's going to take you 45 minutes to get home. That already has become a 4 hour event. Then I think you should spend at least the flight time, the booking time at home preparing. So that's 2.5 hours. So every lesson became 6.5 hours. How many of those can a businessman do in a week that works 12-hour days? Not many.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that creates one, a lot of pressure, but two, just an almost immediate attempt for failure. And I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying you have to sacrifice something else. You have to work less a few days a week. You have to take a couple days off if you want this to work and be successful. I think you can train twice a week, obviously, but you have to really dedicate that time. The young pilots, I think they just think it's about the flying, so they want to rush. I have people call me all the time in May. My son's about to graduate and he's going to go to LSU. We'd like to get his private pilot certificate before he leaves for college. When's he leaving for college? August. When in August? August 1st. So we got 60 days. 60 days to do it. Okay. Are y'all taking any vacations? Yeah, we're going 2 weeks to Hawaii and then we're taking a 2 week cruise in the Mediterranean. So now we got 4 weeks and two week gaps. I would suggest that you don't try to take this on. And people are shocked every time I say that, but what do you think the chances of success is there, Wally?
Probably about 1.6%.
Yeah. And that kid has to be on his A game or
Yeah.
her A game because it's just way, way, way too much. The other piece is burnout. When people want it too soon, the worst thing that I see happening to students is when they start hating flying. It breaks my heart because we probably all got here with some passion and love for aviation. Whatever it was the discovery flight, it was looking up and seeing planes. And then you make it so rushed, so condensed that you actually dread going to the airport. You actually don't feel good driving to the airport. How many days do you not feel good driving to the airport, Wally?
Never.
Exactly. And so when we turn flying or the act of learning how to fly into something that we start to resent or hate, it's not going to be any fun, and we're going to have a lot of setbacks, which takes that desire to get done too soon and it's going to lengthen it. It's going to make it what it is. You're not going to be able to get away from it. So that impatience is one of those things that I see in a lot of people that I don't know how to shake it out of them. I wish I could shake it out of them, but you can't go faster than you can go. And so you got to take your work life, your availability, your financial situation, your ability to study, your ability to retain what you study, tie all that together. And if you don't have a good home, a good flight school, a good CFI, you're gonna repeat stuff and spend a lot more money. That's where the hidden costs of flight training by doing it fast come from. What do you think?
Well, I spent before I became an examiner, I actually taught at a local high school in Houston. I taught music. I taught the percussion section. I taught the drum line, and I did it for about 6 years. And everybody likes to wear the little silicone wristbands. So I had silicone wristbands made up with the name of our drum line. And on the inside of it, I had 3 words imprinted, and they were attitude, preparation, and effort. APE. And I used to tell my drummers, I said, just we want to be apes. APE. Attitude, preparation, effort. And those 3 words, I says, if you come in here, you give me a good attitude, you come prepared, and you give me effort when you're here, we're going to be successful. And I took a lot of pride in really building a really nice program. By the time I left after about 6 years, it was just on autopilot. I didn't even need to do anything. The kids, they policed themselves. It was really a beautiful thing. But notice nowhere in there is the word talent. Nowhere in there did I say, give me talent, because we can't control that. What do attitude, preparation, and effort have to do with each other? They're all things that you have major influence over. I don't say control, because sometimes things are a little bit out of control, but you have major influence. You can control your attitude. You obviously you can control your preparation. And when you get to the school, you can control your effort. And that's the preparation. We keep coming back to the preparation. You use the word study. Study sounds horrible to me. I don't study. It's like, oh God, I kind of go into it's been a long time since I've been in college, but I have gotten a couple of type ratings and I've had to study, and it kind of scares me. But study, and preparing, same thing, right? But I've at least with aviation, I've been very blessed that studying doesn't feel like studying. I'm such an airplane geek that I like it, so it's not hard for me. You gotta find your groove, and you gotta find your niche, and hopefully people, I say to a lot of people who on my check rides, I'll listen to them talk and they'll tell me what their plan is. Well, they're going to do this, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to do this. And nowhere in there do they mention a passion for airplanes. And a lot of times I'll stop them and I'll say, do you like airplanes? And they'll go, oh yeah, yeah. I said, well, you haven't mentioned that. You've talked about wanting to do all these things that have to do with flying, but nowhere in there did you say, I love airplanes. And I think that's what we got to look at. First of all, I mean, do you like airplanes? I joke with people, in fact, I said it to an applicant today. I said, do you like the smell of avgas? And he goes, oh yeah, I do. I said, okay, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing for sure. Yeah, and everybody's life situation is a little bit different, but there's nothing that says you have to get done faster. I can't think of one scenario that would really make me say, yes, you have to do something accelerated, or yes, you have to do this in 90 days. I think it's propaganda on the internet, if nothing else. I don't think accelerated is always the best path for everyone. I think it's something that you have to be thoughtful about, especially if you want to save money. If you want to waste a bunch of money, try to go as fast as you can, but I don't think that that's what anybody wants to do. I normally ask the question, does anybody want to spend extra money during flight training? I've never seen a hand go up. Pace yourself, learn deeply, come prepared. If you don't like the word study, do it the best way you can to save time and money economically. And time to me is worth a lot, so I don't want to waste any of that either. I want to go at the right pace for me, and that's different for everyone that's listening to this podcast all over the world. Find a school that'll help you do it at your own pace. And as always, stay behind the prop and fly safely.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at behindtheprop.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhearn. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.